There's nothing worse than getting completely immersed in a fantasy novel, only to hit a moment that makes you stop and think, wait, that doesn't make sense. Okay, so there are worse things, but I needed a strong hook for this video, so let's talk about plot holes. What they are, how they happen, and how you can avoid them in your writing. A plot hole is a gap in logic, continuity, or believability that breaks the story's internal rules. It's that moment where something happens that contradicts what we already know about the characters or their world. It doesn't have to be a huge mistake. Sometimes even a small inconsistency can yank the reader right out of the story. Think of a character knowing information they were never told, or a magical rule just being ignored for convenience, or a threat being resolved too easily by something the characters could have done all along. In fantasy, where readers are suspending disbelief already, a plot hole can be especially jarring, because the trust you've built with your world is part of the magic. And speaking of magic, consistency is everything. Your world can be as wild and fantastical as you want it to be, but it still has to follow its own internal logic. If you say there's a cost to using magic, stick to that. If a character can't lie because of a curse, don't have them bend the truth later without consequences. Readers remember the rules you set, and they'll notice if you break them without reason. Strong world building isn't just about creating cool things. It's about committing to the logic behind those things. Now let's talk about the magic. Fantasy writers love building our magic systems. But if we're not careful, magic systems can become a plot hole factory. If magic solves every problem with no limits, no cost, and no explanation, it becomes a shortcut instead of a solution. So give your magic rules, give it structure, and give it consequences, because consequences build tension, and tension creates great stories. Now, you don't have to over-explain everything, but even the most mysterious magic needs to be in some way consistent. And plot holes aren't always about world building or magic or logic. Sometimes they happen when a character just acts in a way that doesn't make sense for who they are. If your villain does something self-sabotaging for no apparent reason, or your protagonist makes a major life decision with no internal build-up, your readers are going to notice. Motivation doesn't need to be spelled out in neon, but it does have to feel authentic. Your characters need goals, fears, beliefs, and those should drive their choices. If something big is happening in your plot, ask yourself, why did this character do that? And is the answer already in the story? So how can you avoid plot holes? Here are a few tips. Outline your story, or at least your major events, and make sure that each step follows logically. If you're a discovery writer, you can outline after you finish writing, and this still works just as well. Also, track your world-building rules. If magic has a price, write that down. If the castle gates are locked, remember that later. You can also use what I like to call the hater read. Read through your draft being as mean as possible, pretending that you're an angry reader just trying to poke holes in everything. Be negative, be snarky, and you'll be amazed at what stands out. And finally, get feedback from beta readers, critique partners, editors. They'll spot things you've missed because they aren't as close to the story as you are. What's the wildest plot hole you've ever caught in your own writing? Let me know in the comments.